Welcome gardeners, Lindsay here with the Mindful Living Movement, and I would like to confess. So I am a lazy gardener, and what this means is everything I do in my garden, my processes and everything is to make it the most efficient and quick and least backbreaking process that I possibly can. So today I'm going to share with you my top 9 things that I do in the spring, sort of my order of operations, if you will, of how I work through preparing my garden for planting. And a lot of these things are things you can do before your last frost date. These are in order so that you are not going back and tripping over and just kind of generally doing things the hard way, because, well, that's not what lazy gardeners do. We try to do it the easiest possible way we can. So I'm going to take you around here and show sort of where things are at, what I've been doing, what kind of each thing looks like in detail, and so that you can know how to action your spring and wake up your garden as slowly and as easily as you possibly can without it being a mad rush in one weekend and then becoming that overwhelm and all that stress, because there's a lot of things that us gardeners are worrying about in the springtime, right? We've got to not only clean up and prepare our planting space, but we've got to start actually seeding, transplanting, purchasing, dirt, plants, whatever. So there's a lot of little things that go at it. So let's start at the beginning and we will work our way down the list, and I will share with you why I do them and the order that I will action them in the springtime. So you can see this big garden bed behind me here is all beautifully prepared and ready for planting. And I mean, as a gardener, is there anything more beautiful than seeing that? However, there's a fair bit of work involved in getting your beds ready for planting, from breaking up the soil to making sure you've got all the nutrients ready to go, to having something that holds lots of moisture and also something that you can seed into nicely. So my first and my favorite tool is my Broadfork. Now, this is something that I think I'm on, maybe on about our 3rd or 4th season now, using this really consistently to break up the soil in the springtime. And it's super, super easy. One of the criterias that I wanted for me was that I can actually use it, that I don't require my husband's assistance, like our rototiller, which was what we had used previous to that, and I'm gently shifting into more of a no-dig, modified no-dig technically, with a Broadfork. But I couldn't get our rototiller going. It was an old beast of a thing, and it really kind of drove you around the garden, so it wasn't something that I was able to do. So that was a big thing. I wanted to use that. Now, why is a Broadfork such a great tool? So for starters, the tines on it, as you can see, they're really, really long. They're anywhere from 12 to 16 inches, which is pretty common. It means that you get down really, really far into your soil. Things like carrots absolutely love being planted behind a Broadfork. Because of how you just literally step onto it and your body weight, it really does the work sinking it into the soil. You lean back, you pull it, it's all your body weight. It's all just like gentle leaning. It's actually not near as much work as, say, a pitchfork or wrestling around a rototiller would be. It breaks the roots, so there are a lot of trees in my growing space. I do need to try and bust up the competition of the neighboring roots that try and come into my garden. So that's one of the reasons I'll probably never go fully no-dig. I'll always probably do the modified, at least with where I'm at here. The other thing that I really like about it is that it actually, it's pretty heavy duty, and you can break up soil that still has some frost in it if it's still just a little bit frozen down at the bottom. You kind of need to moderate that a bit. So I've got obviously wooden handles on mine. If I lean on it too much, there's a potential I could snap that. Also, I have bent the very bottom tines, the very tips on mine from trying to work soil way before it was actually wanting to be worked. But I mean, it's a fine line. Play with it, find out, see what works for you. My husband can usually use a little more of his body weight to get down into those frozen soils early spring than I can, which is he's a little more prone to kind of bending all of those things than I am. So there is that. And the nice thing about a modified no-dig, which is really what's happening when you're using a Broadfork, is that you're not flipping your soil end for end. You're not taking all the layers and turning them over and spinning them around. You're just busting up and giving more aeration, more opportunity for roots, more moisture, without disturbing all the microbial layers, without bringing up weed seeds up onto the top surface of the soil. So it is a fantastic tool. It's easy to use and it just benefits the garden. So that is my number one way that I break up soil in the springtime and prepare. All right, so the second thing that I do in my garden prep is to start trying to break up my probably frozen compost. This year it was really hard to do. So I'll start trying to chip away at it as best as I can and just start to like scrape off the top. I leave the lid open and just try and get it warmed up as much as I possibly can. I'll add some water and stuff like that. And then what I found is sort of over about 3 different days, I was actually able to completely empty out one full one that was all ready to go. And then I top dressed my whole garden bed with it. And my goal is always to try and get about 3 inches to cover the top of my whole entire garden. And I actually came pretty darn close this year to having enough to do all of my garden beds in the backyard at least, and also have some left over to be able to fill my pots, which was pretty exciting. That one of these bins is 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, and I had it right full to the roof. So that's quite a bit. It took a little bit to get there, but hey, that's always what we're shooting for. But alternately, if you don't have that much available to you, you may need to start just reaching out to sort of your local supply companies and getting that ordered and shipped in. So that's another thing that you can do ahead of time, way before last frost date. Those companies probably, their piles are maybe even still warm and they're ready to go for you. So shoveling and dumping that all around the garden is obviously a more laborious task. So I like to try and spread that out. If I'm feeling really ambitious, maybe I'll try and do it in a whole day. But this year I, just couldn't because of the fact that my soil, or my compost rather, was frozen solid. So I couldn't have even if I wanted to. And so it kind of worked out nice. I only really worked at it a little bit on a few different days. So it was a much more gentle process. So I recommend doing that. And the reasoning for top dressing is I kind of use my compost as sort of like a mulch layer, again, to further suppress any weeds that might be hanging out. It makes it sort of harder for them to come up to the surface. And I also just really like it for something to direct seed into. It makes, you know, a good, nice, soft surface. It holds lots of moisture. It's usually on the fluffier side, so it sort of ticks all of those boxes when it comes to preparing a nice garden bed. The third thing that I do is, once my soil is prepared, is I then start to pull out all of my irrigation and I start to just lay it out. Because I have sort of a non-traditional garden, there's a lot of different pieces, so I have to figure out what belongs where. I try really hard to label, but that often doesn't go quite as planned. So just laying everything out, making sure I have all the things that I need, checking on what might be broken, what I might need to order, or what I might need to source at a local place if I want to add a new section to my garden. You know, I need to go through the motions of figuring out how to map out what I want to do in that space and how I want to water it. So getting ahead on just figuring out your irrigation, laying it out, just having it ready is really important. You can most definitely hand water even all season long if that's what you like to do, but I don't. Again, lazy gardener. I want my garden to be watered mostly on its own as much as possible. So I try to make sure that my irrigation is ready so that when I do direct seed or I transplant, that it's just there, it's ready to go. I turn it on and everything is happy and ready. And I'm gonna make a video coming up really soon here on exactly how you use drip irrigation when you're starting out at the earliest part of the season, because there's a little bit of a nuance in certain pieces that you need for it to work well without you, again, being out there hand watering. So the fourth thing that I do prior to really doing a lot of my planting is actually to put into practice a stale weed bed. And I'll dive into more of the details of that, but it is pretty simple. More or less, I'm just watering my dirt. I'm watering the dirt that hasn't had anything planted yet in it, because I'm trying to sprout as many of the weed seeds ahead of time as I possibly can. And yes, you're going to be using up extra water, and if you're on water rations, maybe that's not the most practical thing for you to do. But I find that my management of weeds and my overall effort in this season for just a little bit of extra watering, like I'm not standing there and hosing it down. I'm literally just sort of like generally getting the top of the soil a little bit damp, and then I'm on to actually watering the things that I have in my garden. But that is a really, really, really awesome way to go about getting things ahead. Also, if you have perennial things that like to self-seed and you kind of want to know where they are, water and get them to sprout, so that if you do need to move them or there's too many and you want to weed them out, you kind of just have that little bit of extra jump to see what's what, rather than having all of your calendula seeds pop up in the middle of all your carrots, which your carrots will not be happy. So it just gives you a little bit more management, a little bit more perspective on what can happen, and you have a little more control over what's going on in your garden over the season. So if you are going to add in things like low tunnels or even a cold frame, any sort of season extension type tools, you need to prepare your soil ahead of time, because once you start direct sowing, transplanting, putting in the poles for your low tunnel, whatever it is, it's going to be incredibly hard to work that soil. You're not going to get a Broadfork in there. You're not going to be able to probably shovel your compost and put a nice layer nicely. Laying out your irrigation after you've got all the poles and plastic and the whole works is an absolute nightmare. I've done it. I've told myself that I'll just do this first, then I'll lay it out afterwards after I remove the low tunnel, but then you've already got little starter plants and things all over the place, and trying to gently put down big 3/4 inch irrigation tubing without breaking off your precious transplants is very hard to do and you will probably not be entirely successful. So make sure to do all your soil prep first, and that's where getting those things done as early as you possibly can. Lay out your irrigation if you want to work with irrigation. You don't actually have to hook it up. Like mine is not actually functional yet. It's just there. It's laying out on the dirt. It's chilling. It's waiting for me, but I'm not going to be dealing with this big snake and all these headaches and breaking off starter plants. It is just ready to go before I put in my low tunnels and my season extension stuff. Now, an additional item, and this can kind of be done actually ahead of a lot of your preparation, your breaking up of the soil, laying out irrigation, low tunnels, all this. This would be sort of like your very, very, very first thing. And I wanted to just insert it in here because it doesn't always work every season. And it didn't work with my season. We had tons of snow. My garden still had 3 feet of snow after Easter, which is unheard of, but also amazing for irrigation. But there was just no way I was going to be able to use the practice of solarization. And so what it basically is, it's very simple. I'll put a little snapshot so you can see, but you're gonna lay a big plastic sheet over your garden, ideally like a silage tarp that light's not going to get through. And the sun's going to heat and bake, and it's going to sort of sterilize the top layer of soil, particularly the weed seeds. You want to try and sterilize and kill as many weed seeds ahead of time as possible, but you do need some lead time in your season, especially if you're not like the sun's not as intense as it usually would be midsummer, early spring, so you need a little bit of a longer time. I find here for it to really be successful, I need almost about 6 weeks with laying plastic over the garden bed, and that's a pretty big ask. It only seems to really work super good for me in the spring, as if we've had a very light snow year, almost like a drought year, which the 3 seasons previous to this we definitely did, and I had loads of time to lay plastic out and let it do its thing on my garden bed. But I recommend looking into that practice if you are not someone who has crazy late springs and tons of snow, and you think you've got maybe anywhere from a month to even 8 weeks prior to planting, or you're willing to just not plant out a certain bed, and maybe it's having some serious weed problems, and you just kind of want to try and get ahead of those weeds in that particular part of your garden. You could definitely take it upon yourself to go and find some plastic tarps. Ideally ones that don't let any moisture or anything through. You really want to seal that dirt up and get ahead of those weeds. Mixing up your soil for your pots and filling your pots, or just kind of getting them scrubbed out if you don't clean them out at the end of the season, however you like to go about that. But it's definitely a nice thing to have these ready to go before you have all your trays of plants and you're like, oh my God, I need to get things in the ground, I need to get them planted. So these guys I like to have done as early as I possibly can, pretty much the same thing, as early as I can get my compost unfrozen and I can actually start digging out of it. I start mixing up my dirt for these guys. I'll share with you coming up here on my exact mix that I use for keeping plants happy, particularly in a really hot spot like this one. over the season, and what I like to do to also keep very happy, or heavy feeders, I should say, happy, because we know that things like tomatoes and cucumbers and squash, they're very demanding on moisture, they're very demanding on nutrients, and when you stick them into a pot, you have to really sort of level up what is needed to keep those plants happy, because they're not going to have the same access to things as they would in the ground. So get those pots ready to go if that is something that you're going to be using to supplement growing space, or take advantage of a microclimate. This spot here is really hot and sunny, and so I kind of like to take advantage of this by using some pots. So the last thing that I like to incorporate in my sort of pre-season prep for the spring is perennials, but I usually save the work of perennials till the very sort of end of all my bed prep and my irrigation and some of those more complex type of laborious tasks. The reason that I do like to save the perennials for the end is, well, they can wait. They are, especially if they're perennial in zone 3, they're pretty hardy, they're good at doing their own thing. Sometimes I will just give them a little bit of extra water, but even cleaning up like the dead leaf litter and stuff like that from the previous season, you really want to just wait as long as you possibly can to help out with your nice predator insect habitat, and just generally try and keep from stirring up too many of the beneficial bugs earlier than you really need to. I know as soon as the snow melts, we see sort of the grunge of everything and all that brown, and we want to just get rid of it right away, but maybe just wait a little while if you can. So I recommend adding in some perennials, or at least saving your sort of perennial planting, cleaning up all that kind of stuff, maybe a little bit towards the end, unless you sort of find that you kind of have a hole and you're waiting for other things to take place. If you enjoyed this essential spring gardening prep tutorial, then I think you're really going to like my Grow Your Own Food Now gardening course. I have a very in-depth full season of gardening support that you can access in it's an annual and perennial food gardening online course. There is a giant library of video tutorials that are super concise and bite-sized that you can dive into, and I take you through right from the beginning of the season all the way through to the end of the season, from seed starting indoors, transplanting, soil blocks, right into each plant and its specific sort of little nuances, because as you've sure probably noticed, all plants don't like to be treated the same in the garden. So we get to go all the way through that to preserving and putting away all that beautiful harvest that you grew, so that you have it all the way through the winter. Within the course, you have the option to keep my services on standby all season long. So you can literally send me pictures and videos every time a question comes up, send me a message, hey, I don't know what's going on, what should I do here? And we get to work together for the whole season, which is my absolute favorite part about it. So if that is something you're interested in, there's that add-on that you can work with. The course is full of my actual tools and practices that I have honed and refined over many seasons. I share with you exactly what I do in my own garden to garden in as big way as I possibly can, in a slightly non-traditional way, but also gain a ton of food and ease throughout my season, rather than being overwhelmed and frustrated and not knowing what's going on. So if you are interested in tuning in and joining for this season, the link is in the description. So if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and consider subscribing so that you can stay tuned for more videos just like this. I can't wait to see you guys again, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day and enjoy that spring prep, because it is such a special time of the season where we get to bring our gardens to life. But when we are in a state of overwhelm and frustration and, oh my God, I just have to get this done, we sometimes miss out on really enjoying those moments, enjoying the hands in the dirt. So try and take it as slow and easy as you can, spread it out. And if you have any questions, or if you have any other spring prep tips that are absolutely essential in your garden, stick them in the comments. I would love to know what makes your spring easier and faster, and just sort of brings to life your garden without a ton of extra effort. See you again soon.